AITA for giving my sick kid a COVID test before traveling for Thanksgiving. It's the day before Thanksgiving, and my house feels like a war zone. I'm sitting at the kitchen table, typing this out while my SO is sulking in the living room, our plans for Thanksgiving completely appended, and I'm questioning if I did the right thing. Let me explain how we got here because, frankly, I'm at my wit's end. For the past 2 weeks, it's been a merry-go-round of sickness in this house. It started with my 17-year-old daughter, who came home from school one day looking pale and sounding hoarse. She plopped down on the couch and said, "I think I'm getting sick." At first, I wasn't too worried. It's that time of year when everyone seems to catch something, and she's usually pretty resilient. I figured a day of rest, some tea, and maybe a little soup would do the trick. She stayed home the next day, slept most of the morning, and by the following day, she seemed to be on the mend. But then, my 14-year-old son started showing symptoms. He's always been the type to power through anything, brushing off scrapes, bruises, or even fevers like they're no big deal. He's my tough one, the kind of kid who will insist he's fine even when it's obvious he's not. So, when he came downstairs that morning with a stuffed nose, shuffling more than walking, and croaked, "I think I'm sick too," it stopped me in my tracks. His voice was raspy and strained, a far cry from the upbeat tone he usually has. I could tell just by looking at him that he wasn't faking or exaggerating, which is rare because he almost never admits to feeling unwell. His face was pale, and there was this glazed, tired look in his eyes. He collapsed onto the couch, pulling a blanket over himself, and just lay there, staring at the TV without any real interest. That's when I knew it wasn't just allergies or something minor. He's not a kid who lounges around unless he absolutely has to, and seeing him like that was unsettling. I asked him what was wrong, and he shrugged, saying, "I don't know, I just feel weird." He barely touched his breakfast, and by lunchtime, he still hadn't eaten much, which immediately set off alarm bells. Normally, this kid eats like he's prepping for a marathon or some kind of professional eating competition. His appetite is legendary in our house. So, for him to push away food and say he wasn't hungry, that was my first big red flag. He spent most of the day in bed, curled up under his comforter, which is completely out of character for him. Usually, he's bouncing off the walls, whether it's building something with Legos, playing video games, or pestering his sister just for fun. But that day, he had no energy for anything. He didn't even argue when I told him to rest, which is basically unheard of. He just nodded and trudged back upstairs, moving so slowly it was almost painful to watch. When I brought him some tea later, he barely managed to sip before putting it back down, and closing his eyes like even lifting the mug was too much effort. Then dinner rolled around, and he didn't come downstairs. I called him once, twice, and when he finally appeared, he looked worse. His hair was sticking up in every direction, his face looked flushed but pale at the same time, and his eyes were watery. He just sat at the table, picking at his food with no intention of actually eating it. I asked if he wanted something else, thinking maybe soup or crackers would be easier, but he shook his head and muttered, "I'm not hungry." My jaw practically hit the floor. If you've read any of my posts before, you know this kid treats every meal like it's his last, so for him to pass on food entirely, that was a major red flag. The next day, I let him stay home from school. I figured he just needed some extra rest, and I wasn't about to send him out when he clearly wasn't feeling 100%. By mid-morning, he was still moving sluggishly but insisted he was fine. I checked his temperature, no fever, and chalked it up to a lingering cold. By the weekend, he seemed to be doing better. He was up and about, not as energetic as usual, but well enough to sit with us during family movie night and even joke around a little. I thought, okay, we're through the worst of it. Both kids were still a little tired, but it seemed like whatever had been going around had run its course. Life went back to normal, or so I thought. Then yesterday happened. My son woke up looking worse again. He shuffled into the kitchen, barely lifting his feet off the ground, and slumped into his chair with a heavy sigh. His face was flushed, his nose was red from blowing it so much, and his eyes had dark circles underneath them like he hadn't slept all night. When I asked how he was feeling, he just mumbled, "Tired," and rested his head on the table. He wasn't hungry again, another skipped meal, and it was clear he had no energy to even pretend otherwise. My mom instincts kicked in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. This wasn't just a cold coming back for round two. It felt different, more lingering, and heavier somehow. We've all gotten pretty lax about testing for COVID lately, especially now that it feels like a thing of the past in so many ways. But with Thanksgiving just a couple of days away, and knowing we had plans to spend it in a house packed full of family including elderly relatives and people with underlying health issues, I couldn't ignore the nagging voice in my head. What if this wasn't just a cold? What if it was something more? The timing couldn't have been worse, but I thought, better safe than sorry. I pulled out one of the at-home COVID tests we've had stashed away for months and told my son we were going to test him. Cue the eye-rolling and groaning. He's not a fan of the whole swab up the nose thing, who is, but he begrudgingly let me do it. I set the timer on my phone and waited. And there it was, 2 lines, positive. My heart sank. I stared at the test, hoping maybe I was imagining things, but nope, it was as clear as day. Immediately, my brain started spinning. What did this mean for Thanksgiving? What did this mean for everyone we were supposed to see tomorrow? I knew right away that we couldn't go. My sister-in-law's house is small and always packed on Thanksgiving. There would be kids running around, people hugging, and a buffet-style dinner where everyone shares the same serving spoons. It was a recipe for a disaster if we brought COVID into the mix. I couldn't, in good conscience, risk exposing everyone, especially my husband's elderly aunt and his sister, who has asthma. When I told my so, I expected him to be disappointed. Who wouldn't be? Thanksgiving is one of the few times a year when we get to see everyone in one place. The warmth, the food, the laughter, it's the kind of tradition you look forward to for weeks, even months. We'd been talking about it constantly, the dishes I was planning to make, how we'd divvy up responsibilities, and how nice it would be to catch up with family. I'd expected some frustration, sure, but nothing could have prepared me for the sheer anger he unleashed. As soon as I said the words, the test came back positive, so I think we should stay home. His face darkened. He immediately started pacing the kitchen, his hands flailing dramatically as he ranted. "Why did you even test him?" he shouted, his voice already raised in frustration. "If you hadn't tested, we wouldn't even know, and we could still go." The way he said it, like I'd just ruined the holiday single-handedly, took me completely off guard. I stood there, stunned, clutching the counter for support, trying to process what I was hearing. I couldn't believe it. Was he seriously mad at me for doing what I thought was the responsible thing? For caring about the health and safety of everyone we were supposed to see tomorrow? He didn't stop there. He kept pacing, throwing his hands up, muttering under his breath. "This is so stupid. It's Thanksgiving, people get sick all the time, and it's never been a big deal before. Why are we acting like this is the end of the world?" I tried to interject, to explain my reasoning, but he just waved me off, barely even looking at me as he kept going. His tone was sharp, almost accusing, like I'd committed some unforgivable crime by swabbing our son's nose. If we hadn't known, we wouldn't have to cancel anything. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." Finally, when I could get a word in, I tried to keep my voice steady, though my chest was tightening with frustration. I told him it wasn't just about us. "This isn't about ruining our holiday," I said. "It's about making sure we don't ruin someone else's." I reminded him that his sister is immunocompromised and that his aunt, who's in her late 80s, would be at the dinner. "What if they get sick?" I asked, my voice firm but cracking slightly under the weight of the argument. How would we feel knowing we exposed them? I thought this might get through to him, appeal to his sense of responsibility or compassion, but he just shook his head and scoffed, like I was speaking a language he didn't understand. He looked me in the eye, his expression flat but exasperated, and said, "COVID is just like the flu now. We didn't cancel plans over a cold before COVID, so why start now?" That line sent a spark of anger straight through me. I could feel my face getting hot as I tried to keep my cool. "It's not just like the flu," I said, my voice rising a little despite my best efforts. "It's still highly contagious, and we know for a fact that he has it. This isn't a hypothetical situation, we know. How can we justify going when we know?" But he wouldn't back down. He crossed his arms and leaned against the counter, staring at me like I was being completely unreasonable. "People get sick all the time," he repeated, as if saying it again would somehow make it true. they'll be fine. Everyone gets sick during the holidays, it's not that big of a deal. His dismissiveness made me so mad I could feel my hands shaking. How could he be so cavalier about this? How could he brush off something that felt so clearly wrong to me, as if I was overreacting for even considering the well-being of the people we care about? I tried to make him see reason, to explain that even if it doesn't feel like a big deal to us, it could be devastating for someone else. I brought up the fact that we'd be sharing dishes, sitting in close quarters, hugging people we haven't seen in months. How could he not see the risk in that? But every point I made seemed to bounce off him like he wasn't even listening. Can we just enjoy it without overthinking everything? At that point, I was practically shaking with frustration, my voice rising despite myself. This isn't about overthinking. I snapped. It's about being responsible. It's about respecting other people's health and boundaries. Just because it might not affect us doesn't mean we have the right to put everyone else at risk. But no matter how much I tried to reason with him, to make him see the bigger picture, he just wouldn't have it. He was so set in his belief that I was making a mountain out of a molehill that he couldn't or wouldn't see where I was coming from. That's when he really dug in. He accused me of being paranoid and said I was letting fear control me. This is stupid, he said. We've all had COVID before, and we were fine. At this point, I was shaking with frustration. I told him it wasn't about fear, it was about respect for other people. But he just rolled his eyes and muttered something about how I was ruining Thanksgiving for no reason. Now, here's the kicker, he actually suggested that we just lie about it. He said, we don't have to tell anyone. Just don't say anything, and no one will know. That was the moment I lost it. I told him that lying about something like this was completely unacceptable and that I wasn't going to jeopardize other people's health just so we could have turkey and stuffing with the family. If you want to go without us, fine, I said, but I'm not putting our family in that position. He stormed out of the room after that and has been giving me the silent treatment ever since. Meanwhile, I'm trying to make the best of a bad situation. I told the kids we'd have our own little Thanksgiving at home, and they've been surprisingly understanding. My daughter even offered to help me cook, which was sweet. But the tension with my SO is making this whole thing so much harder than it needs to be. So here I am, second-guessing myself. Did I overreact by testing my son? Should I have just assumed it was a cold and gone about our plans? Or was I right to test him and decide to stay home? My SO seems to think I'm being ridiculous, but I can't shake the feeling that staying home is the responsible thing to do. What do you think? Am I the asshole here, or is my SO completely out of line? Because right now, I'm feeling like the bad guy for trying to do what I thought was the right thing. Update. After my husband stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me stewing in frustration, I took a deep breath and tried to figure out how to proceed. It was clear that Thanksgiving as we'd planned it was no longer an option, but the argument with my sulfur monoxide had left me emotionally drained. I still had to break the news to the rest of the family, which was something I wasn't looking forward to. While I knew they would be disappointed, I also trusted they'd understand. We're not the type of family to prioritize a holiday over the health of everyone attending. I pulled out my phone and opened the family group chat, the one that had been buzzing all week with everyone sharing recipes, coordinating dishes, and talking about who would bring the cranberry sauce this year. I typed out a carefully worded message explaining the situation. I told them my son had tested positive for COVID, and although his symptoms were mild, we didn't feel it was right to risk exposing everyone. I let them know how disappointed we were but emphasized that we'd miss them and hoped to see everyone soon. Once we were in the clear, the responses came quickly. My sister-in-law was the first to reply, saying she was sorry to hear about my son and hoped he felt better soon. She said she'd miss having us there but completely understood and appreciated that we were being cautious. Then my husband's aunt chimed in, echoing her support and saying that she would be thinking of us. My mother-in-law replied a few minutes later with a message full of love, saying how much she'd miss seeing us but that she was proud we were taking the responsible approach. Even my teenage niece, who rarely says much in the group chat, sent a sweet feel better soon message with a heart emoji. Reading those responses felt like a balm after the stressful morning. I was relieved to see that no one was angry or upset. Sure, They were disappointed, but they understood the bigger picture. It felt good to know that they supported our decision and weren't pressuring us to come. But then, things took a bizarre turn. Out of nowhere, my husband, who I assumed was still sulking in the living room, sent a message to the family group chat. It was short, confusing, and completely blindsided me. "Oh, don't worry, guys, we'll be there. She was just joking around." The words felt like a slap in the face. My jaw dropped as I stared at the screen, unable to believe what I was reading. My heart immediately started racing, my stomach twisting with a mix of confusion and anger. What was he doing? Why would he say something like that? I had just poured my heart into explaining why we couldn't come, and here he was, casually brushing it off as if it were some kind of prank. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Was this his way of retaliating for our argument earlier? A petty attempt to get the last word, but in front of the entire family? Or was this his misguided way of trying to smooth things over, hoping to avoid disappointing everyone? Either way, I was furious. He knew how seriously I was taking this situation, how much thought and effort I'd put into writing that initial message. And now, with one careless text, he was undoing all of it, making me look like a liar, or worse, like someone who would joke about something as serious as COVID. The chat exploded almost immediately. My sister-in-law was the first to respond. Her reply popped up within seconds, and I could almost hear the confusion in her tone as I read the words. "Wait, what? I thought she just said you weren't coming because of COVID?" She added a few question marks, as if to emphasize just how baffled she was. Right after that, his aunt chimed in, clearly just as perplexed. "Is this some kind of prank? I don't get it. Are you coming or not?" Then came a reply from my mother-in-law, who's usually the one to diffuse any family tension. But even her message carried a note of exasperation. "I'm confused, what's going on here? If it's COVID, that's not really something to joke about." Each message felt like another blow, and my frustration only grew as I saw their confusion and disbelief in real time. I could imagine them all sitting there, trying to make sense of the mixed messages coming from under the same roof. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was infuriating. I had worked so hard to explain things clearly and respectfully, and now, thanks to my husband's reckless comment, the entire family thought I was either a liar or someone with an incredibly poor sense of humor. Then, just as I was about to reply and set the record straight, another message from my husband popped up. My breath caught in my throat as I read it, and if my blood had been boiling before, now it was practically erupting. "Yeah, sorry for the confusion," he wrote, as if this was all a simple misunderstanding. "She just thought it would be funny to mess with you guys. We're all good, and we'll definitely be there tomorrow." I froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. He had doubled down on his lie, digging himself and, by extension, me into an even deeper hole. My hands started shaking as anger coursed through me. What was he thinking? Not only was he continuing to undermine me, but now he was making it seem like I had deliberately concocted some kind of cruel joke to mess with everyone. I couldn't even fathom how he thought this was an appropriate way to handle things. Did he truly not realize the position he was putting me in, or worse, did he just not care? I told the family that there was no joke and no prank, and that my son had, in fact, tested positive for COVID. I explained everything clearly, trying to remain as calm as I could despite the anger and embarrassment bubbling up inside me. I told them my husband had been upset about the decision to cancel Thanksgiving and was now trying to downplay the situation because he still wanted to attend the gathering. I emphasized that I wasn't comfortable lying about something as serious as a COVID diagnosis, especially knowing how easily it could spread and how vulnerable some of our family members were. Every word I typed felt like it carried the weight of the entire morning's argument, and as I pressed send, I couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and exhaustion. For a moment, the group chat went silent. The usual flood of emojis and instant responses was replaced by nothing but the soft hum of my phone in my hand. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, wondering how they were going to react. The silence stretched on long enough that I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I'd over-explained. Maybe I'd been too honest. Maybe I shouldn't have even mentioned my husband's feelings at all. But then, one by one, the messages started coming in, and the reality of the situation began to unfold. My sister-in-law was the first to reply. Her message came through with the kind of bluntness she's known for, and I could almost hear the surprise in her voice through the words on the screen. Wait, what? Are you serious? I'm shocked that you're both saying completely different things about something this important. How is it even possible that you're in the same house and giving us two totally different stories? Her words hit hard, not because they were accusatory, but because they were completely valid. How was it possible? I felt my face flush as I read her message over and over again, my embarrassment building with each repetition. She was right. How could we be so disjointed on something so critical? Then another message came through, this time from his aunt. She was usually one of the most understanding people in the family, and her response was gentler but no less pointed. This is confusing, to say the least. Did you two not talk about this before sending these messages? It's not like you're in different places. How did this happen? I could feel the collective bewilderment growing among the family, their confusion hanging thick in the air like a storm cloud. The idea that we couldn't even align on something as straightforward as whether or not we were coming to Thanksgiving was clearly baffling to them. Feeling the heat rising to my cheeks, I quickly typed out a reply. I admitted, as tactfully as I could, that yes, we had talked about it, but that my husband didn't agree with my decision to stay home. I explained that he had suggested we keep the positive test to ourselves and attend anyway, which I had refused to do. I didn't want to drag him through the mud, but I also wasn't about to let his reckless messaging make me look dishonest or irresponsible. I laid it out as simply as possible, explaining that this was apparently his way of trying to salvage the holiday plans he didn't want to let go of, even if it meant creating unnecessary confusion. My mother-in-law was the next to respond, and her message was both firm and supportive. She said she completely understood my decision to stay home and that she respected me for taking the situation seriously. She also added that she was surprised and disappointed that my husband would try to brush it off as a joke. "This isn't something to take lightly," she wrote. "We'll miss you, but we want everyone to stay safe." The rest of the family quickly chimed in, echoing her sentiments. They said they supported me and that they hoped my son felt better soon. My sister-in-law even wrote, "We'd love to see you all when you're healthy, but please don't feel pressured to come tomorrow just because he is upset. You're doing the right thing." It was like a wave of validation washing over me. I felt seen and heard in a way that I hadn't all morning. Meanwhile, my husband tried to backpedal, sending a flurry of messages to the group chat about how he meant no harm and was just trying to lighten the mood. He claimed he didn't want anyone to feel bad about us missing Thanksgiving, which was why he'd said it was a joke. But the family wasn't having it. They continued to reassure me that staying home was the right choice and made it clear they didn't appreciate the mixed messages. After the group chat calmed down, my husband sulked for a while before finally coming back into the kitchen. He looked sheepish, probably realizing he wasn't going to win this one. He muttered something about how we should make the best of it and suggested that we could still have a little Thanksgiving celebration at home, just the four of us. I agreed with him because I was going to throw a Thanksgiving for us. I hope he realized he was wrong.